This is Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco, 89.5 FM. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. I'm Jess Jamal.
And this is Jamal Dajani.
And we are very fortunate to have in studio with us Professor Rabab Abdulhadi, co-founder and director of the Ahmed program at San Francisco State. In addition, one of the foremost international scholars on intersectional analyses and gender analyses in Palestine. But our top news item today, Jamal, that we're hoping to speak with Professor Abdulhadi about, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, because there are many things we're going to cover today as usual. But what I'd like to put out first is the discussion of the Israeli election. It seems like the Israeli elections, which have been historically fundamentally based on racism and racist exclusionary practices, have...
Well, it hit a pinnacle this year.
Well, I was going to say, the pinnacle has been increased, and they seem to be taking a page out of the Trump playbook. So why don't you give our listeners kind of an update on a summary, and then we're going to just go for the big discussion.
Well, we're going to be talking about how Benjamin Netanyahu is embracing the racist Kahane followers. And for those who are listening or watching us on Facebook, racist extremist Kahanism did not die with the racist extremist rabbi, Meir Kahane, who gave this ideology, basically, this is its name. His disciples and admirers still live, and in fact, they left behind the party, Kahane, Chai, and other different followers. So,
but they were responsible for one of the biggest massacres of Palestinian civilians.
Yeah, I mean, just a little bit of background. 1984, Meir Kahane managed to get elected to the Knesset with his Kach party. And, of course, he died, then his followers remained behind. And now, because Benjamin Netanyahu is finding himself challenged during the upcoming elections. And this is not the first time, because remember, Benjamin Netanyahu, he also embraced who else, right? His foreign minister,
Avigdor
Lieberman, the settler who basically advocates the transfer of Palestinians to Jordan. I should say the settler from Moldavia. So now Avigdor Lieberman who left the coalition,
right.
So now he's replacing him with all these Kahanes or racist Kahanes, to face up against
But Jamal, you should tell our listeners about the Kahanist ideology about historic Palestine. I mean, yes, it's a racist, exclusionary kind of vision of historic Palestine. But they are not only illegal colonial settlers, but they advocate, murderous techniques against indigenous Palestinians in Palestine and have done so for decades. They are known for their active militaristic engagement against Palestinian civilians on a regular basis. And now they're part of the government, or trying to be part of the government.
Well, also remember, even within the Israeli politics, the Kahane former party, political party, Kach, was banned from Israeli elections for racism in 1988. So even though he joined the Knesset in 1984,
to ultra-right racism.
Exactly, it was banned in 1988. And it was then banned entirely under anti-terrorism laws. This is Israeli laws in 1994. Kach and another Kahanist group, Kahane Chai, which means Kahane lives, are currently designated foreign terror organizations by the U.S. State Department.
Yes, and part of it is because they were involved in the murder of Alex Ode,
Right.
the West Coast director of the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee, because he got on TV and said Palestinians should have human rights, and they placed a pipe bomb in his office. So when he turned the office, it blew up and it killed him, leaving a wife and 2 children. And the U.S.
State Department.
No, not only State Department, also even the FBI.
FBI, right.
Have asked for the people who were engaged in that to be extradited from Israel. Israel refuses. So they're
And they
actually still living in Israel. There is a lot of information. People continue, ADC continues to talk about it every single year about what's happening with Alex Ode. The justice has not been, justice has been denied in the case of Alex Ode. There is no justice for his family or for Arab Americans or for Palestinian Americans. So they are still around. And after Trump was elected, Kach actually resurfaced. Jewish Defense League resurfaced. They had celebrations in Brooklyn celebrating Trump getting elected, and it was actually reported in the New York Times, by the way. And then also they are involved in multiple things, which I'm sure we want to get to into this case, including the whole San Francisco collection and the connection with the San Francisco Jewish Federation,
Right.
and the recent.
But the
Well,
point
basically,
is that
just,
Anyway, yes,
just
yeah.
in short, Meir Kahane was an American-born Israeli rabbi
From Brooklyn.
from Brooklyn,
Brooklyn.
who advocated that all Jews move to Israel and completely, this is from his own language,
his own words.
displace Palestinians or the Arab population, as he referred to Palestinians, right? So Kahane openly advocated militant reaction to anti-Semitism. He labeled, we're seeing the same thing now. So anytime you
Well,
criticize
that's
Israel,
why we want to talk
that's
about
an
it.
action to anti-Semitism.
No, but
I
this-
think we needed to dissociate
Well,
struggles
this-
against anti-Semitism as these fake, false attempts to actually discredit Palestinian justice for Palestine by
Exactly.
labeling anti-Semitism.
Exactly.
So now, they've been kind of like pushed to the far right or to the fringes of Israeli politics, even though, by the way, that they've been as members very active, because you asked me who do they represent. Well, they are the nastiest of settlers, especially in the Hebron area.
Yeah.
Right.
In all these settlements, most of these attacks, including the burning of, the Palestinian child
The Babshi.
at the Babshi, and others, attacks on Palestinian farmers, attacks on school children in Hebron.
No, these are the Kahane.
They are all his followers,
Right.
right?
They're
These
the
are the
ones-
same followers that they are basically, put on a pedestal. The murderer, terrorist Baruch Goldstein,
Yes.
who massacred Palestinian worshippers
29.
at Al Ibrahimi Mosque.
Yeah,
So they are from the same group, and now comes Netanyahu
It was
because.
1994 in February, actually.
Yeah, that's right.
So here is the difference. So Netanyahu, last time he ran, what did he do? The last time when he ran, when he thought he was getting in trouble, he started going on TV and publicizing the Arabs are going to take over the Knesset, warning. Remember,
Yeah, that's how we got more Israeli Jews, more Israeli right-wing Jews to go vote for him. Or
Right.
saying the Arabs are coming, the Arabs are coming.
So
Which
this
is a
was
very
this
racist
this
call.
this,
Yes.
this was his message, and now
Sounds familiar.
the new
It's a familiar
message is let's partner with those who want to expel the Arabs, the Kahanists.
Well, as it turns out, Jamal, there is a furthering, and it's hard to talk about this, Rabab. I mean, how far to the right can you
Yes,
go in
yes.
Israeli politics?
Yes.
You have Benjamin Netanyahu, who is a far-right, ultra-conservative rightist, going to the right
Of
himself
his, yes.
to the Kahanists.
Can I say, I think it's to kind of also add more things to the context that you both have discussed. I think it's really important to remember that, Netanyahu has a lot of scandals, by the way. This is part of
He's
the
been
reason
indicted, yeah.
why April 9th, the Israeli elections have been advanced to April 9th.
Right.
Because he is hoping that the elections will happen before all the findings and the charges of the Attorney General come out on his cheating, his lying, his stealing from public funds,
Right.
his corruption, his manipulation of the relationship with Yedaot Ahranot and Israel Hayom.
Right.
I mean, this is all of this stuff. There is multiple scandals, not even one. It's even if he gets off on one charge, it's the other. It's very interesting because it's also a typical Trump recipe, and we don't know who's learning from whom. It's the same playbook. So whenever they get stuck, they create another crisis, or they use, quote unquote, their executive powers. Exactly what Trump is doing. National emergency, because he failed to get the Congress to support his racist wall of death. So now he's declaring natural. I mean, and so all of these things
It's the same
are completely undemocratic, but they continue doing it. So what Netanyahu, he has a crisis himself. Secondly, Israel itself has a crisis, and I think it's really important. It has a crisis. It's unable to justify what it's doing, because every single day we're receiving more and more evidence of Israeli colonialism, racism, apartheid, violence against Palestinians. I mean, there is attacks everywhere. At the same time, there is more and more people from around the world who are seeing what's going on.
Exactly.
And in the U.S., there are more and more people in the U.S. who are seeing this, and more Jews who are seeing what Israel is doing. So Israel is having very real crisis, not only in terms of what it's doing internationally. There is nothing that can clean up Israel's image. Nothing. There is nothing. Even the Hasbara campaign.
Not even Donald Trump.
Not even Donald Trump. They cannot. You cannot cover it. It is so, the stink is so bad that you cannot cover it with whatever you're trying to do. So they keep trying to do it. And even all these sticks, this is what's happening with Israel. The other thing that I think it's really important to remember, that Israel passed this summer the nation, quote unquote, nation state law.
That's right.
That basically excludes Palestinians, excludes non-Jews from any right to determining what the character of the state is and what Israel is about. So now we are actually having further legislation, in addition to the laws, the over 55 laws that they have passed, the law of return, the law of all of the repatriation in the 50s and so on, since Israel was founded. There is also a new law. As if people are confused. If people are confused that this is a colonial, settler colonial apartheid state, they're saying, well, don't get confused, because here's this new law that actually says that Palestinians, indigenous people, and non-Jews have no right whatsoever to determine what the character of the state is.
That's right.
Just in case you're confused, we're telling you what the state is all about. And they passed this law, and all of the stuff that they are doing, the previous Israeli government, and now again we have more evidence, and it's really, really important for everybody to remember that all of these things are connected, that we're having more and more evidence that shows what's going on. So I think when people keep saying this whole myth that pro-Israeli forces keep perpetuating that Israel is a democratic state, Israel can be Jewish and democratic, Israel is the only one in the oasis of democracy in the desert of the Arab world, and so on. I'm sorry, look at the evidence. I'm not saying to people, come and agree with me. Just go look at the evidence.
That's the voice of Professor Rabab Abdulhadi joining us in studio today. So Rabab, one of Netanyahu's campaign strategies are these huge posters of him standing with Donald Trump, shaking hands, smiling, shoulder to shoulder with Donald Trump.
Yes.
So my question to you is, how psychologically people in the United States, because we have a strong, it's not a plurality yet, but it's about 45% of the electorate supports Donald Trump. They do. And then you have a pretty significant plurality, large numbers of people who are against, let's say, Trump and his policies, yet remain very pro-Israel. So my question to you is, how is it psychologically that they could separate or are unable to separate, let's say, this kinship between these two policies, yet still remain, big supporters of Israel, yet have all these, concerns about Donald Trump and his policies?
Let me say a couple of things. First is that, psychologically, I'm not going to get into that because that's your area, but I can speak about collective psyche.
Yeah, collectively. Because it's an interesting thing.
It's a schizophrenia.
It is.
Okay, on the basic level, and again, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, this is not my expertise, but there is something awfully wrong about people who are trying to say there is a kind of justice for some, but not justice for all, which take us back to the principle that we live by and that Ahmed lives by, I live by, we all argue, the indivisibility of justice. There is no way you can say that you are actually against Donald Trump and his policies around immigration, around the budget, basically supporting multi-billionaires and greed and not giving taxes to people, the anti-Islamophobia, the racist discourse against blacks, against Ilhan Omar, even yesterday he was also insulting Bernie Sanders, against the immigrants, against Muslims, against Arabs, against blacks. The guy is equal and opportunity racist and uninformed. This is also part of it, uninformed, that he gets his news from Fox and Friends, which we know it is a rabid site for ultra racist white supremacists and so on. So there is this, and at the same time they want to say they support Israel. So
how is that possible?
How are they? No, and I'm asking, what when you say you support Israel, what is it that you really are supporting? When people, 2-3 years ago, I went with a group of people, actually from Jewish Voice for Peace and other Arab Americans, to meet with Mark Leno, who was a state assembly person. And he sat and he said, I love Israel. I said, Representative Leno, can I ask you a question? When you say that,
what do you mean?
Could you explain to me what do you mean?
Good
when
question.
You say you love, what Israel do you love? Which Israel? Could you tell me what borders it is? Are you supporting Israel, the people who refuse to serve in the Israeli military and refuse to engage in the oppression of Palestinian conscientious objectors? Are you supporting the women and Mahsoum Watch who stand and watch checkpoints? Are you supporting parents against silence who refuse for their children to continue being in the invasion of Lebanon? Are you supporting people who are asking for peace? Are you supporting for all these young Israelis who go and stand witness when Palestinians are holding popular protests every week in order to protect their land from settlers and attacks? Which Israelis are you? I would like to know. When you say I support Israel, he said I love Israel, and he didn't even have an.
Couldn't answer.
And I'm hoping that he would have actually thought about it. So when people say that, I just want you to, because when people say to me,
it's a good
do
question.
you love Palestine? I said yes, and they say, what is it that I said I love? Where I came from, I love the justice-inspired people. I don't love everything in Palestine. I don't love the garbage in Palestine. I don't love the leadership in Palestine if it's doing something wrong. I don't. It's not about. I'm not about everything about Palestine. I'm about justice for Palestine. That's the thing that we. So we need to be very consistent. And this is the problem: is that people are not consistent. So we need to actually expose that. And the other thing is, I think it's really, really important, is that there is a very almost parallel, conflated on top of each other, coinciding right-wing agenda that actually brings the supporters of Israel along with everything that's nasty in this country, represented by Sheldon Adelson and company, represented by the Trump administration, represented by people in the Trump administration.
Parallel tracks.
They're very parallel tracks, and it also represented what's happening in Israel as well. So I think people just need to see they're lining up with each other, and meanwhile we all are fighting for questions of justice for all, not only justice for us. So there is definitely contradictions, not the same policy.
But we need to really confront that, Rabab.
Yes, and we are.
Because for people to say that they are against Trump policies
and then support Israel,
and then say I love Israel.
Yes.
Well, it's not enough.
Yes.
Anyway, I want to switch gears because we need to talk about a lot of issues.
Yes.
And again, reminding our listeners, this is Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco, 89.5 FM. In the studio with us is Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi, the Director of Ahmed Studies and Professor at San Francisco State University. So something also, we're talking about Trump. We're talking also, you can't think about talk about racism in Israel without thinking about white supremacy in the United States.
Right, yes.
And so past 48 hours or less than 40, let me finish just. Past 48 hours.
Jamal, be careful.
Last 48 hours, I'm watching TV, and it's not a huge story. So now what we're watching, this week, right?
Yeah,
Jess?
it's just this week.
I think it's a big story, which is a U.S. Coast Guard lieutenant, and he's a self-proclaimed white nationalist.
Skinhead.
This is the news.
No, he says he's a skinhead.
But he's a white supremacist. He has this huge arsenal of weapons, thousands of rounds of ammunition, plans and plots to kill journalists, to kill also critics, politicians, and other, who are critics of Trump and the whole MAGA movement. And I have to say, this story comes in and out in tidbits. There is no major outcry.
It doesn't become the story.
It is not the story. And the guy, of course, did not jump over the border from Mexico.
Yeah.
He did not travel in a caravan to come into this
He's
country.
born and raised in this country.
He is not part of the Middle Eastern threat traveling within that caravan. And so yesterday I was going crazy. I was like flipping between CNN, MSNBC. MSNBC had more coverage.
Not really, Jamal. Not really.
Then Fox, total and utter silence. A little bit of coverage on CNN. The rest is about, Stone and the trial and the accusations. But this is a huge story. This is a member of the armed forces. This is someone who is kind of like has a whole, cachet of weapons.
Yeah, but with a plan.
And he had plans,
to kill
and he had plans targeting with names. He has, by the way, I should mention his name. His name is Christopher Paul Hasson, which, by the way, on Fox News, they were saying Hassan.
Oh, my.
I am not kidding. Then I listened to it, and another reporter on CNN who is actually Don Lemon. Initially, he started saying, Christopher Hassan, and his name is Hassan. So when you hear Hassan, you start thinking of Arabs and Muslims and whatever.
It's Timothy McVeigh. It's Timothy McVeigh issue.
Then he corrected.
100%.
Then he corrected himself, right? Initially, I couldn't be. I had to rewind to listen to see.
Yes,
Did he say
to make sure
Hassan?
that, yeah.
And he did say Hassan.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is a huge story. This is part and parcel of all these, the mailers, the bombs, the pipe bombs, etc. And the media is dormant. Imagine if he wasn't a Hassan. This is my question. Had his name was a Hassan and not a Hassan, how would the media have reacted?
Not only the media. I want to. This past Tuesday was the 40th anniversary of the Day of Remembrance.
Oh, that's right.
Of the executive order, of the commemoration of the executive order, which is now 76 years old, 1942. The executive order issued by President Roosevelt in 1942 to actually round up all Japanese people of Japanese descent and place them in concentration camp and incarceration camps. There were 10 official recognizable camps, and according to my friends and sisters and brothers in the community, there were 50 other camps that were set up and so on, but these are the most recognizable, and hold them as hostages and construct them as enemy alien. And on Sunday, there was the big commemoration in San Francisco. On Tuesday, actually, we did our own at San Francisco State in collaboration with Asian American Studies. And we had people who've been working with for a long time, like Pastor Michael Yoshi,
Right.
Grace Shimizu, whose family was actually renditioned from Peru. This is the Japanese in Latin America, rendition and brought and also placed here in the U.S. And they were never part of the readers. They were actually not part of the apology and the readers and so on. They're continuing to demand their rights against the U.S. government. And we also have Zahra Billo from the Council on American Islamic Relations. We had a lot of students. The very well-known saxophonist Francis Wong was with us. And we were basically talking about what this means. What this means when something like this. So let's say you're asking me if it was Hassan.
That's my question. I was going to write an article.
And I want to remind you that when they used to say Barack Obama, they never say Barack. They say
Barack Hussein.
Barack Hussein Obama, right? Okay.
So I was going to write an article called Hassan or Hassan.
Yeah. Dog whistles.
You should
that
write
basically points to this, that keeps bringing these issues up about what's going on and what sort of hysteria, what sort of public, actually hysteria is not a good word, that's an anti-feminist word, but what sort of public outcry or something, how could people get mobilized into the politics of hate and the politics of fear, and they start singling out communities and targeting them, which we've seen that in the Second World War. We've seen that within post 9/11 2001. We've seen it multiple times. It continues getting repeated, and people have short memories. This is what happened with Timothy McVeigh, with the Oklahoma City bombing. It happens all the time, and it's always, and the thing is that they don't, even when they, let's say they say Hassan, right? Or they'd say Timothy McVeigh, I mean, the Secretary of State at the time, I think it was Baker at
James
the time.
Baker?
Who, I think it was James Baker, if I'm not mistaken, was said that it was Middle Eastern. I mean, it was at the same time.
Yeah, they were
And it
looking
took
for
a while.
people.
But then they did not come afterwards. First of all, they did not call them terrorists, right? But
They
then
didn't.
they also did not come back and say, we apologize. And it's very, I would just say, let me just bring it to the local level, because this is a very similar story what's happening with San Francisco State University.
Yes.
And where we're at.
We're gonna talk about this.
So can I just make a little connection? So back in October, we discovered that there was a student in my class who was a declared Nazi, who has a big swastika stenciled on his chest, who had all this hate weapons, pictures of weapons on his Instagram and his Facebook page, his social media, that he was calling for the death of Syrian refugees, calling women the C word, calling Arabs and Muslims the S-sand N-word, saying that slavery actually really didn't happen. So only 4%, basically, blacks were really happy with the slavery. He has Heil Hitler. He has things against Jews. I mean, really the same racist agenda. And the students found out about it. We talked about it before, but I want to connect it to what's happening, because these things continue going on. And we alerted the university. The university did not do anything about it. What
They
did
didn't?
is they did not do anything to protect us. What they did is they counseled the student.
They counseled
If
him.
he needs protection, yeah.
If
they
he needs protection.
Yes.
They wanna respect his First Amendment.
Basically, what happened is this is weaponizing free speech for right-wing and hate agenda, for the violence agenda. And what I had to do is I had to cancel all my open classrooms where we were bringing people from the community, just like Tuesday, bring people from the community.
Maybe that was
scholars.
the intention.
Possibly, but the university did not do anything, and people who actually claimed to be concerned about it did not do anything. And I had at the time pointed to the university that this is a real threat, and we needed to remember what happened in North Carolina when
Right.
Stephen Hicks also, there was all this violent violent postings on his social media.
That's right.
And then people kept saying, oh, it's not really a big deal, it's not a big deal, and so on. And actually the first reporting of it said that this was a dispute when he went and killed the two Palestinian women and a Syrian young man
They
student.
said it was a parking
he
dispute.
He shot them point blank, he assassinated them.
Yeah.
And they said it was a parking, and it wasn't even, that day it wasn't even that. He went out of his house, took his gun, went
to
into
their
their house,
apartment.
shot them in their house, point blank, assassinated them, point blank. And the reports, and I have the New York Times reports at the time, that the people, the authorities in North Carolina were saying that this is a dispute over, we do not even know if it's a hate crime and so on. So I pointed that to the university. And they said, no, if it's potential threat, only if there is potential threat. And then they said that a week later, 2 weeks later, the Pittsburgh massacre happened against
Right.
Jewish worshippers in the synagogue, the Tree of Life. That still did not create anything. No. Again, the university did not do anything, did not take responsibility. Today, we're also faced with another, you're talking about taking responsibility and actually backing off. The same thing is happening with the religious holidays that I don't know if I don't remember if
We did
spoke
talk about it last time.
Right? The whole, the provost
The State
putting
of
a
Israel
calendar.
birthday.
Israel Independence Day, quote
is a
unquote,
religious
is
holiday.
a holiday for Judaism.
What's the latest
and
on that?
Missing out, I'll say in a minute, missing out Eid al-Fitr and Ramadan. So after a whole week and after past Dean Montero basically confronted the provost, and she deflected it and also tried to pass it on to a staff member.
Right.
As usual, it's always a staff member, it's always somebody who cannot really, they take responsibility. That's what people do. Actually, this is also what people, sometimes they're coerced into do it. Sometimes they step up and do it because they want to take responsibility, because they're honest and straightforward people. And then she didn't take responsibility as one of the people at the helm of this institution. The president did not responsibility. Instead, they have been trying. I mean, I've been dealing with so many coercion and harassment this past week. It's gotten beyond, because we went on Tuesday to the Senate, to faculty
Right.
Senate, and we demanded that the Senate hold the provost accountable, hold the administration accountable, because if a mistake happens on your watch, let's say it's an honest mistake. I think on the part of the staff person it was an honest mistake. I think it does reflect, though, the institutional immediate Islamophobia, pro-Zionist, The fact that they are so alerted to Zionist viewpoint, to Israeli viewpoint, and so on, and they do not pay attention to us. The fact that they not even consult with us, they want to put a religious calendar. No, they don't ask us. They don't ask leaders of the Arab and Muslim community. They don't ask leaders of the Jewish community, except the ones who are supporting Israel. They do not even recognize the people who are constantly on campus from Jewish Voice for Peace. They don't consult with the students who are from Jews Against Zionism. They don't consult with our colleagues at Zaytuna College. There is so many mosques. There is so many places.
So here is the issue.
Yeah.
There is a systematic, apparently, there is a systematic, either from, you're talking whether it's the government or
Yes.
in academia, looking institutional,
Structural and
looking
institutional.
at Muslims and Arabs as invisible people when it comes
Disposable.
I think it's
disposable and invisible. But also, and I want to
No,
take us
because
back.
we're only invisible. It's about our rights. When there is crimes over issue, we become very visible.
It become very visible.
Yeah.
So taking us back to this Hasson guy, the writing is on the wall. He's a white supremacist. He's an armed white supremacist. And I have to say, I was like looking at his manifesto, this guy. He's like reading and researching, writing this manifesto, gathering weapons, ammunition, other supplies, with basically to carry an attack in the United States. And he wanted his idol. Who was his idol?
Breivik.
Oh, okay.
And there's Breivik,
Right.
and there's Breivik. This is his idol. The Norwegian killer who killed 77 people in 2011
Right.
attack.
Exactly.
59,
Right.
59
So he had
children
this
killed.
whole plan, and then this guy, kind of like, the threat is like, we're still analyzing, like, why did this happen? Did he, he served in the
give
military?
it a couple of days, it will fade from the news.
There
to the
are,
world.
and it's going to fade away from the news. But then when it comes to anything, it has to do.
No, and also just add a footnote to the various murders and all the shootings that have been happening in schools, that have been happening everywhere, in theaters, in malls, everywhere. So we're not out, it's not a hypothetical. It's
Right.
actually a real thing that we've been going on, that the norm of the day, the business as usual, is shootings. Because also they're not going to take, we also need to remember that the NRA, the gun lobby, is also quite strong.
Of course.
And this is what the government's collaborating with too.
That's the voice of Professor Rabab Abdulhadi. This is Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco, 89.5 FM. You're listening to us live on 89.5. We're streaming live on Facebook, Jamal Dajani 2.
Would be on YouTube,
Or
iTunes.
YouTube. We'll get to all of that at the end. But the one thing that I wanted to say that I found was quite disturbing about this, whenever there's an arrest for any kind of terrorism, including domestic terrorism, what typically happens is that the Department of Justice has a press conference. They put out a press statement. They make a big deal of it because part of their goal and part of their mission is to keep the public safe. No press conference, no press release, no big announcement that they've combated domestic
and
terrorism.
Let me add,
So
no concern from the
concern.
head of civil rights, Kenneth Marcus,
Right.
who is supposed to look at hate crimes, at violations of civil rights, and so on, because his only concern is to prosecute cases that have already failed, been closed, against advocates for justice and for Palestine on campuses.
Exactly.
That's his agenda. So all of everything else, but it also fits. It goes back to your earlier question, Jess, that it fits. This is an agenda that all comes together.
It is.
The pro-Israeli agenda and the right-wing white supremacist agenda. Let's not forget Richard Spencer, after Charlottesville, said, I'm a white Zionist. Let's not forget that Yair Netanyahu, the son of Israeli Prime Minister,
Right.
said actually, the only threat the Jews have, which comes from Antifa and the left. I don't feel that the white supremacists are actually a threat to us.
He should have been in Charlottesville.
But he commented after Charlottesville. This was after
I know.
Charlottesville. So this is I think it's really important to also shift the discourse
Yes.
in the way that
Yes.
it is not really a contradiction. I don't think it's a contradiction. I think I think people who continue to support Israel and continue to oppose the policies of hate, of exclusion, of xenophobia, really need to wake up. they need to wake up and they need to face the music. We are at harmony with our politics, with ourselves, with the support of the communities to whom we're accountable. These people really need to stand up and say, actually, what you are doing when you're supporting Israel, when you are claiming that Israel represents all Jews, you're involved in nothing but advancing anti-Semitism.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, Rabab, I think that's a very good point. We live in harmony because we believe in the indivisibility of justice.
Exactly.
But when you have to divide justice, it's a very uncomfortable psychological
it's no longer
state.
Justice.
No, I don't know what it is.
I want to.
I don't know what it is.
I want to take us to
special interest justice.
To the local justice, which is at San Francisco State University.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we should talk about
because we started talking last week. We have so many topics, and every time we cover the court case, the lawfare, and the win against the lawfare project. But the attacks never cease.
Yes.
The attacks continue.
Worse.
And they get worse. And then there is always a new thing, and it's kind of like, excuse me, this is a mistake. And I want to just remind our listeners what we're talking about, right? So last week,
Saturdays before, 2 weeks ago.
I
discovered.
You discovered that San Francisco State University listed Israel's Independence Day as a religious holiday for Judaism.
Yeah.
And to add insult to injury, the same San Francisco State University calendar of religious observances omitted Ramadan. And we're talking about, by the way, about the month of May and June. Mm-hmm. So, this is the calendar.
At the end of June.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the calendar year for academic calendar.
So to add insult to injury, they omitted Ramadan
and
Eid al-Fitr.
Right.
Two major holidays celebrated by almost 2 billion people across the globe, but yet they put
Israel Independence
Day as a religious holiday, which is a big number one.
Which is not even considered a religious holiday in Israel.
It's not a religious holiday in Israel.
No, it's not.
And it's also an added insult to injury to people who care for justice, to Palestinians, to children,
Jews.
To refugees. This is basically commemorating Al-Nakba
commemorating
when 750,000 Palestinians were made refugees overnight, right? So I'm just summarizing here. You could jump in any time. San Francisco State University brought it to their attention, and then they said, it was a mistake, and
they didn't even say
happened?
Publicly it was a mistake.
No, it's still not been described as a mistake yet.
So where are we at now?
Let me ask you, Rabab, two questions. Have they taken it off the calendar yet?
We don't know.
And are they going to add Ramadan and Eid al-Fitr?
They added Ramadan and Eid al-Fitr. Okay, so let me say, the provost, who's actually the person in the spotlight, but I believe the whole administration is responsible because something like this, and the cabinet is small. It's not really big because, anyway, we can talk about the administration of San Francisco State another time. But the provost, who's the one whose office issued the religious holidays, she did two things. One is she said that she was actually implementing Senate policy, hiding behind that. I'm just implementing Senate policy. But
what Senate policy?
Senate policy, it's true that we have a policy from this faculty Senate that we as faculty have and should recognize students' religious observances in order for us to allow the students to be able to,
that's
great. That's wonderful. By the way, not all the holidays are on this list. It's not only the Muslim, not only the insult to Muslims, Arabs, Palestinians, and Jews. There is a lot of things that are missing from it. But I didn't really have the time to sit down and research all of it. So this is the policy which is supposed to actually make students at San Francisco State feel included, feel that their religion is protected, that their beliefs are respected, and so, which is a great policy. It's a great policy, and it has great. So she uses that. So I was implementing the policy. Yes, but you use that policy to do two things. One, to insult further, and two to actually pass off pro-Israeli positions that you have been so there is several problems with it. Let me just talk about the provost. The provost is a scholar of the Crusades. This is her.
I didn't know that.
Shouldn't she know
a little bit about
she is
Islam?
Learning about the Crusades, that the Crusaders are the people who were trying to displace Muslims from Jerusalem? I mean,
Hello.
It's elementary. Okay. But there is another problem that historically, until 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I used to tell San Francisco State during Ramadan, why don't you just reach out to the Muslim community? Why don't you go visit a mosque? Why didn't you send some kind of a greeting? I know that the holidays over the New Year is supposed to be secular holiday, but it just so coincides with Christmas mostly, and they add a little bit sometimes Hanukkah, they'll add Kwanzaa, but it's really about this. And we also take off during Thanksgiving, which is the celebration of settler colonialism in this country and the attack against the genocide against indigenous people. They also celebrate Memorial Day, which is for the armed forces, and they celebrate July 4th, which is the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America, which is similar to Israel Independence Day. Okay. So I have been telling them, reach out to the community. No administrator had ever done it. At some point, I stopped doing it because they were not listening. They never do it. Has never been a top administrator who attended the Muslim Student Association and Muslim Women Student Association fast-a-thon. They do once during Ramadan or after Ramadan. Students, they call for fasting. So people who are non-Muslims fast in solidarity. And then they have this iftar together. And not a single time.
So the administration never held a Ramadan iftar?
Of course not.
I mean, I've been invited. We were invited to several iftars at UC Berkeley.
Berkeley.
But that's
And UCSF.
No. It's not.
At Stanford.
No Ramadan. They don't even know when it's happening.
This is what I'm saying. Muslims are invisible at San Francisco State University.
But it's convenient.
It's even bigger. It's even bigger than that. Invisibility is one thing. It's actually, this is a structural case of Islamophobia and racism. It is not benign neglect. You can never claim it's benign neglect.
So it's intentional.
Because if you neglect, it's the historical studies of racism says that if you are not acknowledging something, you're actually perpetuating it. Number one. Secondly, we have a program called since 2007 called Arab and Muslim Ethnicity and Diasporas that came as a result of the university's insensitivity and bias against Arabs, Muslims, and Palestinians historically, but specifically got worse in 2002, right? We have multiple examples of this again and again. And we are speaking all the time. We're always doing events. I actually used to make it my business to always contact the administration and make suggestions again and again and again. And as you know now, I'm suing the university because I had no other choice but to sue the university to hold them accountable.
They weren't listening.
I do not believe this is the best time of our use, time, and our resources. We should actually be getting into the business of teaching, scholarship. This is what we should be doing. But they need to be held accountable. They need to start thinking either they do the right thing on their own or we make them do the right thing by holding them accountable. So historically, San Francisco State has insisted in its Islamophobia. Historically, whenever there were issues, SFSU has never run and issued a statement right away, as they do whenever anybody who is pro-Israel complains. They jump false charges. When even there are false charges, when I was accused by Amcha Initiative, myself, Ahmed, and Palestinian students of glorifying the murder of Jews, San Francisco State President Wang the next day issued a statement condemning anti-Semitism, even though we were trying to say, let's find out what happened. We don't know if this is that. Even when President Wang hired an investigator to investigate the protest against Nir Barakat in spring 2016, and he hired an investigator. The investigator came out and said, independent investigator, hired by the university. There was no anti-Semitism. There was nothing against the Jews. There was no violence. This was specifically directed against Nir Barakat, who's a racist, violent, very right-wing Israeli politician who is probably vying for the position with Netanyahu, who actually came to actually say that Jerusalem is inclusive and tolerant. We know it is nothing but, Jamal also is a Jerusalemite, but we have all the evidence of that. And the investigator came out and said there is no violence and so on. San Francisco State President in 2017, when Lawfare sued me, the university, CSU, and several administrators, came out and said that this is an evidence of anti-Semitism. You are contradicting the own position. So I am not talking about only ignorance. I'm not talking only about invisibility. I am not talking about quote-unquote benign neglect. I am talking about a concentrated, premeditated, and determined intentional policy of racism, of discrimination, of Islamophobia, of pro-Israeli bias, which is actually abuse and misuse of the office of administrators, hiding behind a mistake of a staff person and letting a staff person, a person of color, take responsibility, as they do all the time, by the way.
Right.
They always let the staff person take the fall and so on, and the staff person cannot do anything because they lose the job
Right.
if they would do it and so it is kind of like, you really, if somebody on your staff makes a mistake, you eat it. You're the one who's in charge. You're responsible.
Absolutely.
Not only they didn't eat it, but they persist. So the provost on Monday, because I had emailed the faculty senate chair, and I said we would like to come and make a public comment because they're not refusing to listen. So we're going to have to hold accountable one way or the other. The union is issuing a statement.
Oh, good.
The faculty union. The students are really, really offended. We have a protest last Tuesday.
Nice.
At the university administration, and we informed everybody why it is. And so on Monday, and we were in the process of issuing a statement. Then Provost Summit puts a small email saying, oh, this is correction, the title, correction religious holidays. So people will think it's a usual business as usual. Most people don't even read a lot of the stuff.
I know.
She says in it came to my attention that 2 holidays were omitted, Ramadan and Eid al-Fitr. And actually she even put them wrong, because we do know that Ramadan and Eid al-Fitr and all the Muslim holidays actually require moon sighting.
That's right.
They don't happen on the exact date anyway, because you have to sight the moon. Everybody knows, everybody who lives in any Muslim or Arab related, very even distant community knows that you never know when the Eid is. You never
she
know
got
when
her
the
calendar
Ramadan is. So
from Wellesley.
We do not know where even
Listen,
the new
we only-
calendar came.
but listen.
But hold on a minute. But I had asked, when I wrote to the provost, I said, have you talked to anybody
we have
in our
limited
community?
time. I want to have Jess to comment,
But they
and
did
then
not.
because
They
I
did
have
not
another
even-
topic
Okay.
quickly.
So listen,
We haven't
Rabab,
finished this topic.
Well, we don't have.
but we will, because we'll follow. But
Yeah.
Rabab,
Yeah.
the next topic that I want to bring up briefly is kind of all related, because we know that the Trump administration had tried to initiate an unconstitutional ban on Muslims, and we've been following
Well,
that.
it passed with the Supreme Court. There is a ban.
Exactly, but it's not a Muslim ban. But per se, they were
In
able
all
to.
practical purposes.
It is a Muslim ban,
Yeah.
unless you're from Venezuela too. But there is a new constitutional challenge. You heard about this American citizen, this Yemeni American who went to Syria, who joined ISIS, who mothered, gave birth to a child, wanting to come home to the United States as an American citizen to face the American justice system.
Right.
The President of the United States has decided that she is forbidden to come back
Yes.
and exercise her constitutional rights.
Of course.
What I want to put out for you and for Jamal and myself to kind of think about, this is going to be a huge
Yes.
test case
Yes.
to take away birthright citizenship privileges and rights.
Yes.
This has never happened in this country before.
It's called fascism.
I think fascism is being too polite.
Okay.
But this case
Yeah.
is for sure going to go to the United States Supreme Court. For our listeners who don't know that, there is an American citizen. She was born in this country. She was born in Alabama. She did go to Syria. She, gave birth to a child. She joined ISIS. She has, come back and said, "I apologize. I did this horrible thing." And this is almost a direct quote. "I want to come back to my country to face justice because I made a mistake." The President of the United States has said no. She is
You
not.
can't face justice.
You can't face
You're
justice.
denied to face justice.
You're
And
denied.
then other people escape justice.
Exactly.
Other people
That's
escape
exactly
including
my
the President
point.
of the United States himself.
Exactly.
So the people at San Francisco State are taking their cue from him.
Well, that's kind of my point, Rabab, that in my mind, this presents one of the greatest constitutional challenges of our lifetime.
There is also the whole attack on the BDS
That-
and the
that-
ways in which.
but
people
it's
are being
all-
prosecuted.
it all-
connected.
It's all
It's all
connected,
related.
which is a segue to the final topic.
For
because
the
I
last
have
few
to add
minutes.
it. This doesn't happen in a vacuum.
That's right.
We know now, as far as San Francisco State University, as far as this whole area, that the Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco has invested $300 million. This
That
is
we know of.
This is that we know of from their tax returns, funding AMCHA, funding
Canary
Campus
Mission.
Watch, funding
Channeling
Canary
money
Watch,
from Jewish
sending-
Defense League,
you know,
Kach,
yeah.
to right-wing causes
Exactly.
here too. Yes.
But now, and this
and
is
white
for
supremacists.
for the next show. We're going to talk about this. Jess, this is not it. So now there is a new discovery.
Yes.
What's the
Which
discovery?
I forwarded to
Yes,
everyone.
yes,
The
yes.
new discovery,
The
Jess.
sludge,
It's
yeah.
not forget about $300 million. This is peanuts, right? This is the kind of the tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
Several charitable organizations, several charitable
Including
gift funds,
Fidelity,
including the
Schwab,
largest charity in the United States. They are helping all to raise money
And
to
funnel.
and fund hate groups. They've raised millions of dollars by giving their donors a way to keep their identity secret.
Anonymous.
While at the same
You
time,
can't do that.
While at the same time,
I know.
claiming tax deductions. Donors Trust, Fidelity Charitable Gift Fund, Schwab Charitable Fund, and Vanguard Charitable are donor-advised funds that provide individual donors with accounts and contribute their money attributed to the funds to nonprofits of their choice.
And Goldman Sachs is going to be
So-
next because the reporter hasn't finished
So
investigating.
Yeah.
these kinds of funds, right, just allow you to keep your identity
Private.
private.
You get the tax
But then
deduction.
you get to save on taxes, right?
And fund hate.
Right? So now, this is just a discovery from the mid 2014 through 2017. These 4 donor funds we know that they have channeled nearly $11 million to 34 groups that the Southern Poverty Law Center consider to be hate groups, and I'll name a few of them.
We're going to have
few
to
of them
follow
that
up.
concern
you
what-
know,
yeah, yes.
David Horowitz Freedom Center
It's the top.
received
About 1.6 million. from
they received
Fidelity.
$3 million. Frank Gaffney's Center
Yes.
for Security Policy, $1.6 million.
Totally.
Anti-LGBT organizations such as Alliance Defending Freedom, $2.7 million.
right.
And the Family Research
Pamela
Council.
Pamela Geller.
Pamela Geller, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a whole list.
American Freedom
I'm giving
Defense Initiative.
giving you the
Yeah.
top
Right.
names because we're running out of time. There are 38
Well, we'll be following
31 hate groups from 2015 to 2017, and it's a full circle. This is the crazy thing about it.
Yeah.
All these organizations and hate groups are all connected,
Can I
and
just
they're
say a
getting
couple of things about San
money,
Francisco State?
tax deduction for hate.
tax deductions
Well, there's
for
a couple
hate.
of issues. One
have
is
only 30
that
seconds,
The
so-
foundation,
No, we have
the
3
Jewish
minutes.
Foundation of San Francisco is very much connected with San Francisco State University in multiple ways. We don't have time to talk about it. We can talk about it some more next time. Secondly, if I'm not mistaken, Fidelity Charitable is connected to Fidelity Insurance,
Yeah.
which runs all CSU pension. That's where we have our 401k.
I know.
So this is very clear connection with that. That is something that has to be taken up by the state, by this public institution.
Rabab, we want to thank you as always
you.
for joining us today.
Thank
You
you
know,
for
it's
having me.
always a pleasure and an honor to have you here. You know that.
Pleasure for me to be here.
And we may have to have you remotely
Yes,
for a few
more
months.
than
You know
happy.
that,
Yes,
but so
yes.
we may be
Yes.
calling in or doing Skype with you so
more
that
than
we
happy
can.
to do that,
But we
yes.
are very thankful that you're with us.
Thank you for
We're
having me.
coming to another end of Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco, 89.5 FM. Jamal, where can our listeners find us?
Well, just go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, and subscribe for free to your favorite streaming service, iTunes, SoundCloud. Of course, you can watch us
Facebook.
live
Facebook.
right on my page,
Twitter.
facebook.com/Jamal
You're on Twitter.
Dajani 2.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.